Hey ladies and gentlemen, Stephen here from Redolessence and welcome back to another video. Thank you all so much for tuning in, I really do appreciate it. And today we're going to be taking a closer look at a fragrance by Navitus Parfums, and this one is called Primas, so make sure to stay tuned. Now, before I begin the video, I know what you're thinking. Are you really reviewing your own fragrance? So I know that this video is going to have to take a slightly different format. And if I did put review in the title of this video, it's really just for search purposes. I won't really be reviewing my own fragrance. I'm going to follow the traditional model that my videos follow on my channel. But of course, I'm not going to stand here and say the most glaring things about my own fragrance because that would be a conflict of interest and it wouldn't be too genuine. However, I do want to focus on the more objective aspects of the fragrance, like how I came up with the name of the fragrance, how I came up with the name of the company, how I came up with the quote that I decided to attach to this particular fragrance, and what are some of the things that I specified in the brief, which perfumer I worked with, so on and so forth. So I will try to make this a mostly objective video. I'm certainly not going to get on camera and say this is the best fragrance in the world, go out there and buy it now, but I always encourage people to go out there and sample it first, in the very least, get your nose on it and see what determination you can make for yourself. And so the name of the fragrance is Primas and the name of the company is Navitus Parfums. I came up with the name Navitus because it means a few different things. So it means passion, and anybody who is into niche fragrances has to be so because they're passionate about it. And so a lot of niche fragrances have quite a high price tag. I think for my particular brand, with the cost that went into producing the fragrances, it's a bit underpriced just because it is a 100 milliliter bottle. The presentation was quite expensive. It's 25% concentration of aromatic compounds, and you can probably do the math on the other things. And also, I did work with several reputable perfumers, and the perfumer for this particular fragrance is Jorge Lee, who works out of a factory in Turkey called MG International. Another thing that Navitus means is it has roots in the word nora, which means journey or voyager, and fragrances certainly do take you on a journey. And a lot of these fragrances that are part of the collection are non-linear, in the sense that the way that they smell in the opening is going to be quite different from the way that they smell in the dry down. And the other thing that the word Navitus means is energy. Whenever I spray fragrance on, it definitely gives me a burst of energy. It shifts my mindset. A lot of times I could be having a bad day, but I spray on something that I associate with very good and very positive memories, and it's kind of like getting a fresh haircut or getting out of the shower. You just feel like your best self and the best version of yourself. And so I went with Navitus Parfum. And so with Primas, Primas means the beginning. So think of words like primary. And I thought of a fragrance that would remind somebody of having a fresh start. You know, there's this quote that says, you always get an opportunity to do things better because every day is a new day. And so one of the things that is being symbolized by the infinity symbol, and I do consider fragrances to be infinite or immortal in the way that they ingrain themselves in your mind, but one of the things that is being represented by the infinity symbol is this concept of self-fertilization or reincarnation or having a fresh start. And when I smelled this fragrance, I always had this image of a phoenix in my mind. And I suppose it's because of the more earthy elements in the composition, like the oak moss, the patchouli, the woods, the amber woods, and everything that's in here, the rosewood. And something about it was always very earthy, very damp, a little soily, if I may mention that as well. And so I'm really excited to tell you what I get in terms of the smell. Let's start things off with the presentation. Now, in terms of the presentation, the box has this sleeve that comes around it, just says the name of the company at the top, Navitus Parfums, and the name of the fragrance is Primas, and you can see that towards the middle. There is a bit of a texture here, and so that if you feel it, the infinity symbol has more of a lustrous look as opposed to everything in the background, which is a bit more matte. And then you have the size towards the bottom. Now, on the back of the box here, you have this 2-paragraph description that I actually wrote. Feel free to pause your screen if you're interested in reading it. And the alcohol percentage is 70%. About 4 or 5% of it is aqua. This fragrance is concentrated at 25% aromatic compounds. Now, the box for this one just says Navitus Parfum in gold foil here on the front, and it does have a drawer style presentation that you can open up. and it reveals the silhouette of the bottle with a bed of silk on the inside. Now on the inside of every box, you will see a card, just has the name of the company towards the bottom, the name of the fragrance in the middle, and then towards the top, I have chosen to assign a Latin quote, a very popular Latin quote with each one of my fragrances. So this one says Semper Paratus, which means always prepared. And like I said, Primas, meaning the beginning, you get a fresh start. When you have a fresh start, you're always prepared for what your day may throw at you. And then on the back here, you have 3 adjectives that I also came up with describing the general sense of what you'll get from the smell. You have all of the notes, and of course, I like to give credit to the perfumer. In this case, it's Jorge Lee. So the bottle for this fragrance is quite dark. You just have the name towards the top, the logo at the bottom, and it is a very heavy bottle. Those who have purchased it or felt it in person know exactly how heavy it is. It's about 2 pounds. It has a Zamek cap that does fit on there quite snugly, but I wouldn't recommend picking it up from the cap. On the bottom of the bottle is where you'll find your information. The fragrance does have a pressurized atomizer, very wide distribution, and you can control how much you want to spray. And the back of the bottle has the same 3 adjectives that you also find on the card. Let's continue with the smell. Now, as soon as this fragrance opens up, the first thing that I noticed about it was the freshness. And so it kind of has this bright bergamot, citrusy, effervescent top, and it is compounded with this note of green mango. Now, it doesn't smell like an overly fruity, sweet, luscious green mango. It's a little bit more on the bitter side. And I don't know how much of that is actually influenced by a lot of the ingredients that are resting in the base of the composition. And so a part of me feels like that soil undertone, that earthy aspect to the fragrance, the oak moss and the patchouli, really does have an influence over a lot of the more volatile ingredients that I seem to be getting from the opening. Now, I know a lot of people have expressed the sentiment that there's this Aventus-y vibe, and I completely agree with people. I think in the opening, you are going to get a little bit of that freshness that some people may compare to pineapple. It's really interesting because it's an ingredient that I feel like it's used in many different fragrances. And so for me, there was an Atelier Cologne fragrance called Musk Imperial that kind of had that gene to it. There's also Vespero by Jeroboam. There's also Orion by Tiziana Terenzi. And there are many, many other fragrances that kind of have that Aventus gene. I know Mont Blanc Explorer is another fragrance. But here, this is done in the most muted way. And it really only lasts on my skin for like 5 to 10 minutes. I think that the more earthy, grounding, green, and verdant elements of the fragrance start to come through once you really give it an opportunity to dry down on your skin, and that's kind of what I was going for. So when I received a few more mods from the factory, there were some that were much brighter. There were some that had what in my nose I perceived to be an overdose of ambroxan, and I wanted to go with something a bit more harmonious, something a bit more muted, and something a bit more tame. And so this one has that freshness, but it doesn't linger for the entire duration of the fragrance. In the dry down, you start to get into more of these like earthy elements that on my skin come across rather strongly. Now, in terms of the dark amberwood, I've seen dark amberwood being used in a lot of fragrances that kind of have like a Baccarat Rouge vibe. They almost have like a roasted tonka bean thing going on in the base, and there's absolutely none of that going on in here. What you really get more so in here is almost something that might find itself in Chypre territory, but not entirely. And I know Chypre as an olfactory classification could be inclusive of many different ingredients because the name means cypress. And so, but in this particular fragrance, I do get a lot of this mossy nuance that rests underneath, but there's also this high complement factor to the fragrance as well. And this is a complement factor that I can't necessarily say I would get from like Absolutio or Virtus or many other, or even perhaps the 2 ouds that I released in the line. It is something that is replicated with Navus and Intimus, of course, but I feel like those are a little bit more on the mass appealing side, and I think each fragrance definitely has its place within the collection. I also appreciate the fact that this fragrance can't quite compare to any other fragrance in the collection. It kind of stands out in its own right. It stands on its own 2 legs, and I really appreciate that about this fragrance. Now, in the deep dry down, you are going to get most of that patchouli oil that I spoke about earlier. And the patchouli that I get in here is not a very chocolatey patchouli. So if you're thinking along the lines of like a Noir de Noir by Tom Ford, you're definitely not going to get anything similar to that. But I get a more bitter herbal variety of it that I feel like melds really well with the other earthy and green ingredients of the fragrance. And so this is one that I really appreciate because it kind of fits its own niche in the collection. It doesn't smell quite as sweet as Absolutio. It's not quite as complex as Oud Imperium, and it's also not as creamy as Virtus, and it kind of does its own thing here, so I can really appreciate it for that. But of course, this is a fragrance that I directly worked on, and so I would urge you to go out there and smell it for yourself. Please don't blind buy. Obviously, go out there, get a sample for yourself. I know there have been a lot of people decanting online. I do think that a discovery set is the best way to get your nose on it. Unfortunately, we are sold out at the moment, so I'm hoping to get some in soon, hopefully by next month, but I will certainly keep all of my subscribers up to date regarding any new releases or whenever we do get back in stock on certain items. And I know a lot of people have been messaging me wanting to get their nose on the fragrances, and so what I will say is that whenever we do have something back in stock, I'm going to make sure to let you know right away so that you can go ahead and make that decision on whether or not you want to purchase or sample or anything like that. But that has been my take on Primas. Let's go ahead and finish things off with my overall assessment. Now, first up, in terms of the uniqueness and the overall smell, I know I mentioned earlier that it kind of has a little bit of this Aventus gene, but there are so many fragrances doing that nowadays, everything from Scent de Peace by Bond No. 9 to Vespero by Jeroboam to about 24 other fragrances that I can probably list off if you guys cared for me to do that. But I do think that there's something about this fragrance that allows it to stand on its own 2 feet. It kind of goes in a unique direction, and it doesn't rely on many of these other ingredients. I kind of give Aventus its overall identity, and so there really isn't any pineapple in this one. There isn't any birch. There isn't any vanilla, which the most recent batches of Aventus, they have a lot of vanilla, and so it kind of goes in its own direction, and I really appreciate it for that, and it hits close to home for me, and so I really like this one. In terms of the overall smell, it is appealing. However, keep in mind that it has this earthy dry down, and so you have to be a fan of those Chypre type fragrances, I think, to fully appreciate this one. But I think somebody who doesn't have too much experience into that classification as well might really enjoy this one. In terms of the longevity on this fragrance, I get 8 hours on my skin. The projection for this one is great for the first 2 hours. So these are things that I actually specified on the briefs, and it's one of the reasons why I played around with the concentration a little bit. And so from the factory in Turkey, I actually received 2 different concentrations on this fragrance, and we chose to go a concentration higher than both of the mods that I received. And so the concentration for this one is 25% oil, and like I said earlier, these are things that I specified on the brief. I wanted to go with something that lasted 8+ hours, something that catered towards my majority demographic on my channel, and so I'm excited for you to try this fragrance. In terms of the versatility on this one, I do find it to be rather versatile. I could possibly see somebody not wanting to wear this one in the dead of summer though, and so get your nose on it first and see if it's something that will cater to your personal taste. I think if you're looking for something to be worn when the weather gets really hot outside, I would go with something like Navitus, which is a very bright, fresh, citrusy composition made by Chris Carbonell out of Spain. However, if you're looking for something that's a little bit more rough and tumble, but something that also has this counterpart of freshness to it, I think you might really enjoy Primas. I think that this could work well on a man or a woman. I would love to smell this one on a woman, but like I said earlier, I was kind of targeting my main demographic on my channel, and it'd be silly not to, but definitely smell this one for yourself. These are just recommendations. Anybody can wear what they want. I truly believe that all fragrances are unisex. And in terms of the presentation, I personally really enjoy it. I know a lot of money went into it, and it was a significant investment, and I'm always thinking about the next thing that I can do regarding all aspects of the fragrance, not just inclusive to the presentation, but smells and different avenues to explore. So I'm always receptive to people's feedback. Thank you for those of you who have been leaving your comments on this channel. I really do appreciate it. So my final verdict for this one is, if you're a fan of a lot of these Chypre type fragrances, but you're kind of done with the note of oak moss or fir, or a lot of these coniferous notes that I think have been used in such a large scale in the 80s and late 70s, and you don't want something that smells overly dated or mature, but something that still flirts with that cheaper territory but manages to do things in a very bright, youthful, citrusy, mildly fruity way. Definitely check out Primas. If you're looking for something much brighter, check out Navitus. If you're looking for something a little bit darker, definitely check out one of the two ouds, and I would recommend Oud Luxuria if you're looking for something a little bit more on the animalic side. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That was a discussion on one of my fragrances, which is Primas by Navitus Parfums. I really want to thank you all for taking the time to watch this video. I realize that I haven't dedicated a video to many of the fragrances within the collection, so I will aim to do that in the weeks/months to come. If you would like me to do a video on one that I haven't covered yet, go ahead and leave a comment down below. Let me know. I would really appreciate that. And I would also like to open this video up to a 5 milliliter decant. And so if you can just go ahead and leave a comment down below, I will enter you into the draw and I will select the winner in 1 week's time. And you can live anywhere in the world and I will give you the sample if you happen to win. So just make sure to tune back here in 1 week's time to know if you've won. I will have the winner's comment pinned to the top of the comment thread. Thanks again for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If you are new to this channel and you took something of value from this video, I would love it if you could subscribe to this channel. It's easy and it's free. All you have to do is click that red button in the corner, and this way, whenever I do upload future fragrance related content, it will get delivered straight to your feed. You never need to worry about missing any of my future uploads. And of course, that includes fragrance reviews just like this, top 10 videos, giveaways, unboxings, special guests, interviews, and a whole lot more. Thanks again for watching. I love you all. We'll see you next time. Bye.